This man wanted to attack the woman, but he didn't know she was not alone there. She hit the ground hard. Palms scraped against the asphalt. Her shoulder twisted as she tried to break the fall, but the weight of the man stayed on her, towering, unrelenting. His grip tightened in her hair, yanking her upright just enough to steal the breath from her chest. No one was around. The road behind them stretched empty in both directions, flanked by scrub trees and sagging barbed wire fence. Afternoon heat shimmered off the pavement. The birds had gone silent. She kicked once, tried to twist away. He said nothing, just held her tighter, like he had all the time in the world. Somewhere in her mind, she had always feared this exact kind of moment. Not the scream, not the struggle, but the quiet before. The part no one ever talked about. The silence where you realized no one was coming, but someone was watching. Before we go on, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to tap the bell, so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the wild. Neither of them saw it at first. The man's focus never left the woman beneath him. He was too deep inside whatever rage had brought him there. His hand clenched harder in her hair, forcing her back as her knee buckled again. That's when she saw it. Not him. Her. The animal. Standing just beyond them, right in the center of the road. So silent. Watching. The bobcat's paws were wide and steady, planted as though the earth belonged to her. Muscles coiled beneath a dusty gold coat. Her ears were turned forward, alert. Her tail twitched once. She didn't growl. Didn't charge. She just stood there, eyes locked on the man's hands. The woman froze. Time slipped sideways. For a moment, the only thing she could hear was her own heartbeat and the wind brushing over the road like breath. Her body ached. Her face was half turned toward the gravel. But her eyes, wide, blinking against the sun, were fixed on the creature standing guard. Then the man noticed her staring. He glanced over his shoulder. And stopped. His grip loosened, just slightly, like instinct had pulled it back before his brain had caught up. He turned fully now. Saw the bobcat. And for the first time, he hesitated. The cat took one step forward. It was slow, deliberate, controlled. There was no sound but the soft pat of her foot against the hot road, and something else. Something older, heavier. The weight of a warning. She wasn't large. Not compared to him. But her presence filled the space like a force. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Her eyes were fixed on him like a mirror. Like she could see every part of him, even the parts he kept buried. Another step. Closer. And the man stepped back. He didn't speak. Didn't argue. He just slowly released the woman's hair, the same way someone lets go of a wire fence once they realize it's electric. The woman stayed frozen where she was. One knee scraped. Elbow trembling. Breath shallow. But she could feel it. Something shifting. The man looked between her and the cat, calculating something he couldn't quite explain. The bobcat's head dipped slightly. Her ears flattened. And that was enough. The man turned. Not fast. But not slowly either. He didn't look at her again. He just walked back the way he came, vanishing into the brush on the other side of the road without a word, without a sound, as though something primal inside him had been unspooled. And still, the bobcat didn't move. She stood there a few feet away watching the woman now. Her body calm, her breath even. She had not come to attack. She had come to be seen. And now that the danger had passed, she waited. Waited to know if the woman understood. She sat on the edge of the road for a long time. Not crying. Not moving. Just sitting, one hand resting over her knee, the other gently pressed against the side of her neck where his fingers had been. The sunlight was beginning to turn. Late afternoon tilted toward evening, and the shadows stretched farther now, blurring the road's edges into soft golden shapes. The bobcat hadn't left. She remained 10, maybe 12 feet away, sitting now the way cats do when they've decided something is no longer a threat, but still deserves to be watched. Her ears flicked once at a bird call, but her gaze kept returning to the woman. There was no fear in her. No urgency to leave. Just presence. That was the strangest part. She wasn't supposed to stay. She was wild, untouchable. The kind of animal that vanished into the brush the moment it sensed a human too close. But she stayed. When the woman slowly stood, brushing grit from her palms, the bobcat didn't flinch. When she took a step toward her bag lying in the dirt, the animal merely tilted her head. Their eyes met again. And for a moment there was something there. Not magic. Not fantasy. Just something so real it didn't need words. The woman didn't speak. She slung the strap of her bag over one shoulder and turned toward the direction she'd been heading. Her pace was slow now, cautious, but steady. And the bobcat followed. Not directly, not beside her, but quietly, weaving between shadows along the far side of the road. She never came too close, never made a sound. But she didn't leave. Mile after mile the woman walked. Her feet ached, her legs shook, but still she kept moving. Because stopping again felt like something she wouldn't survive twice. Every now and then she'd glance to the side, and find the bobcat still there. Still watching. Still walking. Like a sentinel made of dust and light and silence. They passed no houses. No cars. The world felt emptied, as if it had peeled back just enough to let something old walk through. And the bobcat, she belonged to that older world. At the next curve in the road, a rusted street sign leaned sideways, half hidden in grass. The woman didn't look up at it. She already knew she was far from anywhere she wanted to be. But the bobcat paused. Stopped entirely. The woman kept walking for another 20 feet before she realized the sound of footsteps. Even the soft, padded ones had disappeared. She turned. The bobcat stood still, her gaze focused not on the woman but on something else. Off the road. Into the brush. Toward a narrow path between tangled trees. It wasn't just curiosity. It was intention. The kind of stare that says, "I've been here before." The woman followed her line of sight. There was nothing obvious there. Just thick underbrush, old fencing, and oak trees that hadn't been trimmed in years. But the cat didn't blink. Didn't move. And slowly, the woman stepped toward her. The bobcat didn't run. She simply turned, slipped through the first line of brush, and vanished. But she didn't disappear. Because a few seconds later, a faint movement deeper in the trees, the swish of her tail, the tilt of her ears, invited the woman forward. Something inside her hesitated. Not because she was afraid of the animal, but because she wasn't sure if this was real. And yet, her feet moved anyway. One step, then another. She pushed past the thorns. Let the low branches scrape her arms. She didn't flinch. The cat was ahead of her now, pacing slowly down a path that shouldn't have existed, barely more than a memory of an old trail, pressed into the earth by years of wild steps. And the woman followed her deeper into the woods. Not because she had anywhere else to go, but because in a world where everything had just broken apart, this was the only thing that hadn't turned away. The trail wound deeper than she expected. Twists of sunlight filtered through the high canopy, dappling the forest floor in slow-moving shapes. Somewhere above, the wind moved gently through the leaves, but down here, it was still, as if the woods themselves were listening. The bobcat moved like a ghost, always just ahead, her shoulders rippling beneath her fur as she weaved between fallen logs and narrow gaps in the brush. Every so often she'd glance back, not with impatience, but as if checking that the woman was still following. And she was. It didn't make sense, not in any way she could explain. But in her gut, something told her to trust this path. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the steadiness of those amber eyes. Or maybe it was just the way the rest of the world had stopped asking her to explain herself. Here she didn't have to. When they reached a small clearing, the bobcat stopped. The woman followed slowly, stepping through a curtain of vines into a quiet, green space surrounded by wild ferns and stones layered with moss. A shallow stream ran across one side, its water cold and clear, bubbling gently over flat rock. The bobcat circled once, then laid down. Not in fear. Not in warning. Just rest. And the woman understood. Her legs folded beneath her almost on their own, and she sat a few feet away watching the cat breathe. For a moment, neither of them moved. And then the woman lowered her gaze to the stream. She cupped water into her hands. Drank. Let it cool her throat. She didn't speak. There was no need to. That became the rhythm of the next hours. Maybe even days. The forest blurred the boundaries of time, offering its own pace. Slow, deliberate, rooted. She followed the bobcat through thickets of sweet cedar and tangled undergrowth. Slept against tree trunks wrapped in vines. Ate berries she knew from childhood, the safe ones, and caught rain in a fold of her jacket when it came. The bobcat came and went. Never far. Never close. At night, the woman would settle near a patch of dry leaves and often, just as her eyes were closing, she'd hear a soft rustle, a paw landing gently nearby, followed by stillness. She never turned to look. But she always knew. She wasn't alone. On the third evening, just after the light had turned orange behind the treetops, something changed. The bobcat had returned from one of her quiet rounds, stepping back into the clearing as she always did, but this time she didn't lie down. She stood at the edge of the trees, staring in a direction the woman didn't recognize. Ears sharp. Body still. The woman sat up slowly. The cat didn't move. Then, suddenly she turned and bolted into the trees. No sound. No explanation. Gone in seconds. The woman stood. Waited. But she didn't follow. The forest felt different now. The hush was heavier. Even the birds had gone quiet. She waited the whole night, curled beneath a low-hanging oak, eyes flicking open every few minutes. Morning came without her. So did the next one. 2 full days passed. No paw prints. No rustle. No presence in the brush. And with each passing hour, the woman felt something tightening in her chest. Not fear. Not loneliness. Just the quiet return of a question she hadn't dared to ask in days. Why me? Why then? Why her? She walked the old trails again, softly calling, not with sound but with intention. Letting her hands touch the low branches the cat had once passed under. Letting her breath match the rhythm of the forest again. And then at dusk she returned to the clearing. The stream still ran. The stones were damp with moss. But something was there now. A mark. On the far side of the stream, pressed into soft mud, a single track. Fresh. Not just a bobcat's paw print. Larger. Deeper. Her heart stalled. She crouched, examining the print without touching it. Another lay a few feet beyond. Then a third. Each angled differently. Not straight. Not purposeful. Almost like a circle. She stood slowly. Turned toward the trees. And then she saw her. The bobcat stood just beyond the clearing, barely visible between the trunks. Her gaze was fixed on the woman. But her posture was different now. Tense. Cautious. Behind her, a second shape moved. Smaller. Then another. The woman's breath caught. Kittens. 2 of them. They crept forward nervously, peeking out from behind the mother's legs, tiny shadows with oversized paws and round ears, blinking against the light. The woman didn't move. The bobcat didn't blink. And in that moment, everything made sense. She hadn't just been following out of curiosity. She hadn't been protecting out of instinct. She had been watching the woman, studying her, deciding something. And now she was showing her why. She didn't approach the kittens. She only watched, still as the trees, quiet as the wind threading through the pine needles above. The mother had revealed them but not offered them. That, too, was a kind of trust. One that had to be held gently, like smoke cupped between trembling hands. For several long moments, the world felt suspended. A small, sacred pause between 2 beings who did not speak the same language, yet somehow understood each other better than most who did. Then the bobcat turned. Her tail brushed softly against her smallest cub's shoulder. Without a sound, she led them away, deeper into the trees. The woman didn't follow. She knew better now. This bond wasn't made of possession. It was built on permission. She stayed in the clearing that night, listening again to the stream, to the breeze, to the small rustles that reminded her she was never truly alone. But something had shifted inside her. The ache in her ribs felt different now. No longer panic. Just a tenderness that didn't have a name. For the first time in days, she let herself sleep deeply. No startles, no dreams, just the slow breath of someone not afraid. The next morning she walked. Not far, just to gather berries, fill her hands from the stream, rinse her face in the chilled water. But as she stepped back into the clearing, something on the ground caught her eye. Laid across the flat rock at the water's edge was a squirrel. Dead, but untouched. No torn fur, no scattered feathers. Placed. She stared at it. Not in horror, but with a slow, blooming realization. This was not random. She hadn't seen the bobcat return, but she had. And this was a gift. A gesture. Wild animals didn't bring food to humans. Not like this. Not without meaning. The woman knelt slowly beside the stream, staring at the squirrel. She didn't touch it. She just sat beside it, her eyes soft, her breath caught somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. She whispered something then. Not a word. Just breath into the world. The days that followed blurred in golden light and quiet patterns. She saw the kittens again, peeking from behind fallen logs, chasing shadows across mossy rocks. The bobcat always nearby, always watchful. But her presence was different now. Less guarded. More present. Sometimes the woman would leave bits of foraged fruit along the stream's edge, and by morning they'd be gone. Sometimes she'd wake to paw prints beside her sleeping place. One evening, as the light turned pink across the tree trunks, the woman sat near a patch of wildflowers, gently untangling the ends of her hair with her fingers. Her skin was scratched, her jeans torn, but her face, it had softened. The tightness in her brow was gone. The trembling in her hands had faded. She was becoming something else. Not lost. Not found. just here. But not everything in the forest had softened. The next morning she noticed something strange. The squirrels were gone. So were the birds. The usual chatter of the trees had gone still, not in peace but in tension, like the woods were holding their breath. When she returned to the stream, the water was still running, but the air felt heavier, thicker, as if something unseen had stepped into the space and refused to leave. She waited that evening, hoping to see the kittens again. But they didn't come. Neither did the bobcat. She didn't panic, but she didn't sleep. Instead, she sat with her knees tucked to her chest, listening. Hours passed, and then, a sound. Not leaves, not paw steps, something else. Heavy, snapping brush, slow, dragging. She held her breath. A shadow moved in the trees. She rose carefully to her feet, heart pounding in her ears, eyes searching the darkness. It wasn't the bobcat. Too tall, too loud, too human. A flicker of blue, denim. Then a shape, wide shoulders, dark hair, moving low through the trees like someone trying not to be seen. Her stomach dropped. He was here. The same man. The one from the road. She backed into the shadows, breath tight, every sense wide open. How had he found her? She didn't run. She couldn't. If she made a sound, he'd hear. If she moved, he'd see. She waited, silent. His footsteps moved closer, pausing at the edge of the clearing. He scanned the area slowly, eyes sharp, cold, like a hunter. She slipped behind the thickest trunk she could find, barely breathing. And then, another sound, soft, a step in the opposite direction. Her eyes flicked up, and she saw her. The bobcat, high on a branch, perfectly still, watching, waiting, not running, not afraid, but this time, not alone, because behind her, on the branch just below, were the kittens, curled together, hidden, silent. The mother held her ground, and for the first time the woman realized she wasn't the only one in danger. She didn't move, didn't dare. The man stepped into the clearing now, one boot crunching softly over dry twigs. His movements were careful, not like someone lost but like someone who had been watching for a while. He was thinner than before, dirt on his sleeves, sweat down his temple. But his eyes, they hadn't changed. She pressed herself against the bark of the tree, heart pounding against her ribs. Not from panic, from calculation. Could she run? Would he see her? Would the bobcat? A branch shifted above, soft, deliberate. The mother was still there, crouched like stone on the limb, eyes locked on the figure below. And just beneath her, the kittens. Too small to fight, too young to run. They didn't understand the danger. But she did. And so did the woman. She watched as the man scanned the ground, his eyes falling on the half-buried fruit skins the woman had left earlier. His jaw twitched. He was tracking her. That's what this was. Not a random pass through the woods. Not luck. He had followed her steps, signs, decisions, all the way here. She didn't know how, but she knew why. Some people didn't want control. They wanted power. And when you took that power back, they came looking. He turned slowly now, and for a moment, too long, his eyes brushed the base of the tree she was hiding behind. He stepped forward. One pace. Then another. Still not close enough to see her fully, but close enough. Then, something changed. A sound. Not a snarl. Not a scream. Just a thud. Like weight leaving a branch. He looked up. Too late. The bobcat dropped. From 10 feet up, her body hit the ground with perfect precision. Claws out, fangs bared, a flash of gold and fury. She didn't aim to kill. But she didn't aim to miss. Her weight slammed into his shoulder, knocking him sideways before he even understood what was happening. His back hit the ground with a grunt, arms flailing to push her off. She raked once, a shallow line across his forearm, just enough to leave heat and warning. He shouted, kicked, rolled. She backed away, crouched low, tail lashing. Not attacking again. Just standing her ground. A line drawn. His breath came hard now. Blood smeared across his sleeve. His eyes wide. And then he saw her. The woman. Standing now. Not hiding. Not afraid. She didn't move toward him. She didn't speak. She just stood, one hand resting on the tree, the other curled softly by her side, like the forest itself had risen in her spine. He looked between them. The wild and the woman. Two beings who had every reason to fear him, and no longer did. Something in his face cracked. It wasn't anger. It was confusion. Like the rules he had written, about power, silence, dominance, had all been erased. And then he did the one thing none of them expected. He ran. Turned on his heel and bolted through the trees, crashing through brush like an animal too large for the forest that now rejected him. The woman didn't chase. The bobcat didn't follow. They simply stood there watching the space he'd left behind. A long moment passed, then another, and slowly, the bobcat's body softened. Her tail lowered. Her ears lifted. Her gaze returned to the tree above. And one by one the kittens crept down. The woman sank to her knees. Not from exhaustion. From release. The world, this small piece of it, had been held together by something invisible and old. Something no one else would believe. And now it was quiet again. The kittens padded toward their mother, pressing against her side. She licked the smallest one gently behind the ear, then glanced toward the woman. Their eyes met. Not in victory, but in knowing. They had protected each other, each in their own way. And that was enough. The sun had started to fall. Not quickly, but in that slow, dignified way the light leaves when something sacred has just happened. The clearing shimmered in gold. The dust in the air turned to light. The kittens curled beside their mother again, safe now. Still unaware of the full shape of the danger that had passed through. But they knew her warmth. And that was enough. The woman sat quietly across from them, knees pulled to her chest, chin resting on her arms. There were scratches along her forearm. Dirt on her face. But her eyes, they held stillness now. Not the kind that comes from giving up, the kind that comes from finally being here. No running. No hiding. No explaining. Just presence. The bobcat stretched slowly, her movements fluid and effortless. She nudged one kitten gently, then stood. Her ears flicked once. She turned to the edge of the clearing. The woman watched but didn't rise. She knew. It was time. Not a farewell. Not abandonment. Just the end of a moment that had done its work. The bobcat walked a few paces, then stopped. Looked back. Their eyes met one last time. And there, in that glance, lived everything they'd been through. A cry silenced. A life spared. A silence shared. And a bond made not through ownership but through grace. The cat held her gaze just long enough for the woman to understand. You're not broken. You were never alone. And you do not belong to your pain. Then she turned, stepped into the trees, and vanished. No rustle. No sound. Just absence, the quiet kind that carries love with it. The woman stayed seated for a long while. Let the wind move through her hair. Let the hush of the woods settle into her lungs. She didn't cry. There was no need. What had happened here, what had been given, was not something that grief could hold. It was something else. The kind of healing that doesn't announce itself. The kind that happens in the bones. In the breath. In the way your feet begin to trust the earth again. By dusk she finally stood. Her legs were unsteady but they held. The trees no longer towered. They welcomed. She followed the path the bobcat had once led her down, now dappled in fading light and memory. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. The forest had given her what she didn't know she needed, and taken nothing in return. At the edge of the woods, where the trees thinned and the world returned to its old shape, she paused. There, lying in the dirt like an afterthought, was her torn backpack, the same one she'd carried when everything had begun. She picked it up, slung it over her shoulder, and smiled. Not big, not for anyone else. Just a small private curve of the lips, like the world had whispered something kind only she could hear. Then she walked, out of the trees, toward wherever the road would lead, and into the rest of her life. Somewhere miles away, a shape moved through the underbrush, a blur of gold. 3 shadows trailing behind her, bounding and playful. The bobcat paused atop a ridge, eyes scanning the valley below. Not hunting, not hiding, just watching. The wind brushed over her ears. She blinked slowly, and kept walking. Not alone. Not anymore.